started here. Representative Rowe, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, everyone, for being here today to hear about this very, very important subject that we are discussing. First thing I'm going to do is have our representatives here introduce themselves. Representative Armanini, if you could start.
Thank you, Chairman Kale. My name is Mike Armanini. I'm from the 75th District, which is Elk and parts of Clearfield County. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chairman Kale, for holding this policy hearing, and thank you, Representative Struzzi, for hosting it. I'm Representative Brian Smith from Jefferson County and Northern Indiana County, Legislative District 66.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dawn Oberlander, State Representative from the 63rd, which is all of Clarion County and part of Armstrong, and Representative Struzzi's neighbor. Thank you.
Representative Josh Kale, Beaver, Washington Counties.
Good morning, everyone. Jim Struzzi, you are in my district.
Good morning, everyone. Dallas Kephart, 73rd District, Clearfield and Cambria County.
Good morning, David Rowe, the 85th Legislative District, Union, Snyder, Juniata, and Mifflin Counties.
Also online. Oh,
all right,
I'm sorry.
I'm good. Who the hell am I, right? Doesn't matter. Rigby, 71st, Cambria, Somerset. Go ahead.
Sorry, Jim. Sorry. Also, we have online Representative Marla Brown, and I'm not sure who else. My eyes aren't as good as they once were. But for those of you that are online, if you could just raise your hand using the hand function to make sure that when you ask a question, we'll call on you at that point in time. On this subject that we have before us today, energy policy in general, the energy tax in particular, this gentleman to my right, Representative Rigby, has been an absolute leader within our caucus. There's Struzzi. I'm sorry. I'm losing my. It's been a long week in Harrisburg. Representative Struzzi has been an absolute leader on this topic. Last year, 2 years ago, he has been leading the charge on getting us out of bad energy policy. And here we are in his district continuing to fight that, and he's continuing to lead that charge. And Representative Struzzi, I'm sorry. I'll hand it over to you.
It's okay. Hey, thank you. I really appreciate Chairman Kale and the Policy Committee and my fellow representatives being here today. As was said, it has been a long week in Harrisburg. When you're dealing with the budget, we're there for many long days. So I appreciate everyone making the trip to Indiana County to be here for this very, very important energy policy hearing. As you all know, the Homer City Generating Station announced earlier this year that it would be decommissioning, shutting down, losing 129 direct jobs, hundreds more within the community, impacts on our local tax base, which these guys are going to talk about. And there's a number of factors for that, but the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, the energy tax, is one of the main drivers and which is why I have been fighting against that for 4 years now. Regardless of how you feel about the environment, the impacts on us here in Indiana County are dire. We all want clean air, we all want clean water, but my philosophy, my belief is that we can do that together and still capitalize on the energy resources we have here in Pennsylvania. We need to take advantage of our resources, our fossil fuels, but do it in conjunction with good, sound environmental policy, and we have not done that in Pennsylvania. The energy tax, RGGI, has pushed capital investment out of this state for many years now, and it's time for that to end. It is still part of the budget discussion. The governor still has it in his budget book as generating $663 million at our expense, at our job losses. When again, we don't have sound energy policy, we don't have sound environmental policy. We need to marry the two. We really do. to make sure that the future of Pennsylvania, the future of this community, of Indiana County, of this Commonwealth is viable and strong, and we have the resources to do it. So I'm really excited for everyone to be here today. I'm looking forward to the testimony. And again, thank you all.
Thank you, Representative Struzzi, and thank you for your leadership on these issues. It is absolutely critical that we keep highlighting these issues and keep fighting for sound energy policy in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We've had a number of hearings on this topic and how it impacts different facets of Pennsylvania's economy, Pennsylvanians, and how it, from a broader standpoint, how it affects our security as a nation. The bottom line is the energy policies that we've seen over the course of the last number of years has created a situation where we are paying more for less. We're paying more for less, and it's not good for our wage earners, as Representative Struzzi has so clearly articulated over the course of the last 4 years. It's not good for our local communities, as he has shown as well. But it's also not good for our grid stability. When we keep going down this road of increasing demand for energy and decreasing our ability to generate energy, we're going to end up with serious, serious problems. And by the way, I would actually argue that it's bad for our environment, this energy policy, because all it's doing is increasing demand for manufacturing in places like China, where there are no environmental policies whatsoever, where there's no regulation whatsoever. We have the cleanest manufacturers in the world in Pennsylvania, and we're telling them to go to China every time we have bad energy policy like we have here. So today we have two panels of testifiers. Our first panel before us today is the testifiers Powering Our Communities panel. The first testifier, Greg Columba. He's the business manager of Homer City School District. We have Judd Crow, is the president of Robindale Energy, and Sean Steffi, the business agent, executive board trustee of the Boilermakers Local 154. Mr. Steffi, as you know, I'd also like to let the crowd know, my father was a Boilermaker at Local 154, along with my uncle and another one of my uncles as well, but I have a lot of uncles. So, gentlemen, Mr. Columba, the floor is yours if you'd like to begin.
Okay. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. As you mentioned, my name is Greg Columba, the business manager at Homer Center School District. Closer. Sorry. Good? I've been with the school district about 3.5 years, and it probably wasn't every single person I met coming into the district from employment after introduction instantly we turned to keep that power plant open. And it wasn't long, in my employment that I realized why. The Homer Center School District has 796 students. We employ 129 employees, which is 115 full-time positions, 14 part-time positions. We employ 64 teachers, 8 administrative positions, and 57 support staff positions. Obviously, like all schools, we're supported through local revenue, state funding, and federal grant funding. Our local tax revenue is just over 40% of our annual revenue budget. So when you look at the Homer City Generating Station's value to our district, it's worth $720,000 in real estate tax revenue annually for our district. It's over 12% of our local annual real estate tax revenue for the district. It's actually 4% of our entire budgeted revenue annually. To cover the loss for the Homer City Generating Station, assuming a full loss in tax revenue, we would need a 14% real estate tax revenue for our district. It would be a just over a 2.3 mil increase for our taxpayers. If the revenue cannot be increased adequately through local tax revenue, the only other means to make up that revenue would be increases in state funding, which we're currently the lowest funded district in the county, or a reduction in our cost. A reduction in cost obviously would directly affect the programming for our students or potential employment loss at our district. In 2009, a reassessment, was done on the Homer City Generating Station. That assessment in 2009 reduced our tax revenue $390,000. A full loss on the current real estate tax revenue would sum up to $1.1 million lost revenue to our district and a just over $19 million budget, which is obviously a dramatic impact. So I just wanted to hope to kind of give a good visual picture on the financial loss we're going to encounter with that, with the Homer City Generating Station closing. Obviously, we don't know when the impact will hit, how soon, but it's coming. But that's all I had. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Mr. Crow?
Good morning. My name is Judd Crow. I'm president of Robindale Energy. Robindale consists of a group of 20 different companies in the power, mining, trucking, and material handling space. We have about 1,000 employees locally in Clearfield, Indiana, Cambria, in Somerset County. Last year we paid over $100 million in wages to our employees in the area. And as we look at our business lines, our main business in the area is mining waste coal, reclaiming waste coal to power the area. We power about 500,000 homes with the capacity we have. And the market signals that are coming from PJM, as well as the federal and state policies like potentially RGGI, if it would be implemented, are major concerns for us, not just from our own businesses, but for local reliability and economic issues. Pennsylvania is the largest exporter of electricity in the country, exported about 100 million megawatts last year. It was the second largest producer of natural gas in the country, and the third largest producer of coal. If it was its own country, it would be the 11th largest energy producer in the world. So it has a very critical role in this country's in global energy market. Post-pandemic, as we started to see more and more retirements inside the PJM, Pennsylvania has been, for the most part, spared from this issue. So for every 1 megawatt of coal plants that have been retired, 1.5 megawatts of natural gas that have been built. And so the economic fallout has not directly impacted our state yet, in our view. As you look at coal production and power production in the state and what will be impacted going forward on federal policies, our main concern is that you'll see a significant decrease in power exports out of the state due to RGGI, as well as a significant decrease in coal production. That, combined with difficulty in permitting, export capacity in the pipeline, could have a huge impact overall to this area, in our view. And it is at right now, these industries, utilities, and mining and natural gas production make up about 5% of the state's GDP. And if certain retirements happen over the next 6 to 8 years, not only are we going to have major economic decrease in overall economic activity in these areas, but we do feel like we're going to have a reliability issue that could be very, very catastrophic. We almost experienced one over Winter Storm Elliott. A lot of the facilities in this area that are being scheduled to close provided the necessary power to keep the lights on through that period. And as we look at energy balances over the next decade, they are going to get incredibly tight, partly because Pennsylvania is decreasing their energy capacity outbound. So that's our main concern, not besides just an economic standpoint, but a personal safety standpoint. So anyway, that's.
Thank you. Mr. Steffi?
Good morning, representatives. As you all know, I am the business agent for the Boilermakers, and I'm also the president of the South Central Building Trades, which has Indiana County, and represented that plant and all organized labor that worked in there, all 16 of us. You know, the one thing you might not know is I'm a lifelong resident of Indiana County, and this is my hometown right here. My sisters, my brothers, my son, my daughter graduated Homer Center High School, including myself. My dad still lives right up the street. My sister's the magistrate right down here. We have strong ties to this community. Generations have went to this school district. So Because we're here today to discuss the effects of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and reliable baseload electricity that everyone in this room can no longer take for granted, okay? Everybody thinks they flick that switch, electricity comes on. They don't understand what it takes to make that electricity. And the Boilermakers play a large role in that. So does all of organized labor. Organized labor built that Homer City power plant. We maintained that power plant. It was one of our biggest producers of man hours within the building trades in southwestern Pennsylvania, especially the Boilermakers. So we gotta look at the red flags that have been thrown. I mean, the PJM and FERC and NERC, which is your North American Electric Reliable Corporation, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, have all said that we're in imminent danger for grid collapse. And we all know what that's over. It's over regulations and, you know, let's just face it, it's been a heavy build out of renewables that are intermittent and unreliable source of electricity. So, I mean, in the opinion of the building trades and the opinion of the Boilermakers, this catastrophe is all completely avoidable. We must continue to build out our coal, natural gas, and nuclear, and at least maintain the current coal fleets that we have, like the two that sit, or like Keystone that sits in Representative Oberlander's district, and the other one that sits in Conemaugh, right near New Florence. We need to keep Robindale going, and Seward, Boilermakers, and building trades labor play a large role in maintaining. We built the Seward power plant. So there's a lot of jobs and a lot of man hours, just not right here in this community, but throughout southwestern Pennsylvania that depend on it, and building trades jobs that have accrued millions of man hours through the time of that plant, which will now seem to cease here in July. So I would like to talk about the jobs and the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So we've been told that this initiative will create, you know, tens of thousands of jobs. I've asked them, what are those jobs? What are the jobs that we would like you to, that they would like us to transition into? I really never get a direct answer, and it's like, you know, the new renewable jobs. You know, at the end of the day, they're not great family-sustaining blue-collar jobs, and for the most part, on my end, they're not union organized labor jobs. But it was interesting. I found through the NRDC, you know, they're touting how many jobs, the 45,000 jobs that they produced over a 12-year span in the 12 states. But it's not jobs, it's job years, okay? In 12 years, they created 45,000 job years. So let's look at the definition of a job year. It simply means one job for one person per year. So if you break that down, 45,000 jobs, if you divide that by 12 years, you're looking at 3,750 jobs. You divide that by 12 states, you're looking at 312.5 jobs per state. Now, that's my math. Anybody can look at it. It's right there. You can Google it. That's the jobs they produce. But let's look at natural gas. Just look at natural gas. In the span of the start, it created 423,000 jobs. It's put over $75 billion towards the state economy, and it makes up 5.6% of Pennsylvania's total GDP. That's just natural gas. How about coal? How about nuclear? So these jobs that we're looking to erase, I just don't see, it's apples and oranges compared to what we're going to lose. So another point that we no longer can ignore, we cannot ignore this, what Ohio and West Virginia are currently doing. And I'd just like to read a little excerpt here out of the Ohio State Senate General Assembly comment here, General Assembly. Natural gas is an abundant, efficient, exceptional, clean production in Ohio is critical. Now more than ever, natural gas increases environmental quality, proves a reliable energy source, increases tax revenue, and creates well-paying jobs. Increased natural gas production is a key to strengthening our food and energy supply chains. How about the manufacturing sector that is created in Ohio? How about the world's largest chip plant from Intel is going to be built. How about the electric vehicles, EV batteries? Sherwin-Williams, Whirlpool, General Motors, Ford, they become the third largest manufacturer in the country. But what you fail to realize with that also is over the last 4 years, they built 12 brand new natural gas-fired power plants, okay? Just celebrated building the largest natural gas power plant, the Jersey plant, this side of the Mississippi, while here in Pennsylvania, we mourn the loss of our largest coal-fired power plant, and we just watched a $1.2 billion power plant get shut down by environmentalists in Renova to that community, okay? We can't ignore Virginia getting out of RGGI, okay, and 2 weeks later announcing that they're going to start building natural gas power plants. Why is that? Because they need reliable baseload electricity to build data centers. Data centers are a large draw on electricity. Why does Ohio and West Virginia choose not to join RGGI? Because they need reliable baseload, cheap electricity to fuel manufacturing sectors and fuel new steel mills that are being built in West Virginia. And what do we see in West Virginia? The Mountain Valley Pipeline is going to go right through West Virginia, down into Virginia, okay, to export liquefied natural gas, okay? We may be sitting on the Marcellus Shale, but so is Ohio and so is West Virginia. And there's no shortage of it, and it's not going away in 10 years, okay? Lastly, the Virginia should be a wake-up call. Glenn Youngkin, Governor Youngkin getting out of RGGI, okay? Why is that? I just told you it's data centers, but there's more to that. He knows that we have a reliability problem with the grid, and he will not let the people of Virginia face another Winter Storm Elliott reliability problem, okay? And that can be avoided right here. We've seen the other day that Texas already asked their residents to start conserving energy with a heat wave. It's real. If it's not real, somebody needs to come out and say we're crying wolf, and PJM, FERC, and NERC are really not telling us the truth. But they're independent, and I don't understand why. And when the Senate had the PJM in front of them, and Mr. Hague was representing the PJM, they were asked during Winter Storm Elliott, how did renewables, do during the Winter Storm Elliott? And he replied, as projected. But nobody asked him, what was that projection? I'll tell you what that projection was. Solar produced zero, okay? It's no lie. Anybody can pull up the PJM grid, the generation mix. Look at it on a daily. Renewables is not going to cover us in our lifetime. We cannot come up with the battery storage to do it. It's not going to happen. So we need to maintain what we got and build out new things. The building trades are ready. The Boilermakers are ready. We can build new things. We got hydrogen. We got SMRs, okay? We got natural gas plants that we can build instead of shutting them down and closing them with environmentalists doing victory laps around that plant on the hill and doing victory laps in Renova, okay? We need to come together and work together, all of us, and come to a better understanding. Look at the data, analyze it, and let's go and let's move forward with the truth and what we really need to do. So, to end, the residents of this state do deserve clean, reliable electricity. There's nobody in this room and nobody in this town that wants dirty air, dirty water, and a bad environment to live in. And we can do it with new technologies. And we can create great union, family-sustaining, blue-collar jobs. Building trades are ready to come in and build them. Right now, we're poised and ready. So it's possible. We can start right here in Homer City, right up on that hill. This community deserves something to move in up on that hill up there that produces family-sustaining blue-collar jobs. And the building trades are ready to build it like we've done in the past up there. It can start right here. We can give taxes back to this community. This community deserves it. We've watched the decline of coal jobs in this community. We've watched the decline of manufacturing. I can go on and on of FMC, Robert Shaw, Dietrich's. We can go on and on in the manufacturing sector that's been lost. We can bring it back here. We need this community and this county deserves something to come up on that hill up there, and it needs to produce family-sustaining blue-collar jobs, and it needs to produce good labor jobs, and we're ready to build it. And thank you, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. We also had Representative Twardzik join us and Representative Cooper join us online. Mr. Steffi, or anyone on the panel, as far as that plant, I think Representative Struzzi mentioned it, but just to rehash, how many jobs is that plant shutting down going to impact?
The Homer City plant?
Yes.
Well, I think there's over 100 and some direct workers there, but what you don't understand, or maybe in this room you guys understand it, building trades labor does all the maintenance there, okay? The outages, we've watched the outages decline, just like at Robindale's plant this year, we sent all organized labor we did an outage. So up there you may have 200 Boilermakers, 100 fitters, 20 laborers, 50 pipe fitters. So you're talking about hundreds of jobs that are indirect. And we're not even counting the trains that carry the coal, the trucks, the ripple effect jobs, the fleets of vehicles that sit up here that are taken care of by local auto mechanics here, the welding supplies, the metal supplies. So you're talking a lot of jobs, a lot of indirect jobs. And, I've got no problem with renewables, and they can be put geographically and strategically placed. But at the end of the day, the other thing was when Winter Storm Elliott hit, coal carried the load, okay? It was coal again, okay? Coal was producing as much as nuclear and natural gas. It was right up there. And it was Keystone and Conemaugh was carrying the load, and Seward, okay? So, how do we get rid of that much, base load, reliable electricity and the jobs that go with them throughout the community, like we're saying? It's not a win-win situation. And if I could just, one more thing, it's no secret that the Mariner pipeline runs right down along 119 with gas. It's no secret that there's a compressor station sitting on the backside of that with natural gas, that plant up there, and they got Marcellus shale wells. I think it's a no-brainer. Let's build a new natural gas plant up there. If we don't want the coal and we want to tear it down, let's build something. But let's not knock down every tree up on that hill and throw a solar farm up there that doesn't produce no jobs. When it's done, there's one guy there with a squeegee and a lawnmower. We need jobs. That's what we need. Thank you.
And how much electricity does that plant produce, Homer City?
I think it's close to 1,888 megawatts.
Okay.
That's almost 2 gigawatts.
Representative Struzzi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for your testimony. Truly powerful. Greg, thanks for sharing the local impact. I believe also that Center Township would lose about $60,000 of a tax base. I think that's the number that I heard. That sounds small to some people, but for a rural township like Center Township with a small tax base, that's significant. My question to Mr. Crow, other states that understand the importance of reliable energy are helping their power plants comply with federal regulations. Those that aren't even considering something like the Greenhouse Gas Initiative. But the federal impacts that are coming, in 2028 is what I understand is some of the big impacts that will affect you guys. What would be the cost and what would you need to do to be able to comply with those federal regulations?
So our facilities, we believe, will actually make compliance by 2028. And to be clear, I am arguing against our economic interests here by trying to keep competitors on the market. But as we see the PJM develop and the potential, the announced closure of KeyCon in particular after Homer City has shut down, we believe there are major stability issues that other states like Ohio and West Virginia have been very active in addressing. And in following the stakeholder process post Winter Storm Elliott, it's become at least very clear to us that the majority of states in PJM now are very active to push their political or industrial power policy, so to speak. And Pennsylvania has been sitting on the sidelines in this area. But Pennsylvania being the cornerstone of PJM, it actually generates 1/3 of all the megawatts in PJM. So Maryland, Delaware, all these smaller states that are importing power, whatever their policy is, it frankly really doesn't matter. Because PJM relies on Pennsylvania to make up that shortfall, and Pennsylvania has been consistently in that leadership position. As we look forward to 2028 and the amount of megawatts, not only on a short-term, 1,800 megawatt capacity, but over an entire year, the exports out of this state, I think, could could be dramatic from a GDP standpoint for each individual household. So last year, the state exported about 100 million megawatt hours. And if you looked at market pricing, you could argue that was between $800 to $900 per person in income to the state. And as we look forward to 2030, you could see that number get cut in half at minimum. And in addition to that, increase costs to all consumers. And so it's unclear to us that the PJM mechanism or stakeholder process right now is working to ensure facilities or a retirement like Homer City, that a dispatchable generation facility is replaced by it. We were back in 2006, we purchased the the Sunbury coal-fired power plant. It was a 420 megawatt plant out near Schmoken Dam. Back in 2010, we decided, we heard about this Marcellus Shale, saw gas prices fall, and started, and we're facing pretty steep environmental compliance costs for MATS. Decided to permit a coal-fired, a natural gas powered power station called Hummel. Hummel, we permitted it, sold it to a group of private equity investors who spent about $1 billion to build what I believe at the time was the largest coal to gas repowering project in the country. That facility during Winter Storm Elliott, my understanding, performed remarkably well, added about 1,000 megawatts per hour through the entire event. It's been kind of a mainstay in the community, and seeing that entire process for that project to get off the ground from a permitting standpoint, et cetera, I would view it almost impossible for a developer to be able to develop that project today with the potential for a carbon tax out, over potentially coming into play in Pennsylvania. And I think we've seen that now with multiple projects being announced in other states that do not have the RGGI overhang. And so I do think it's a policy failure, frankly, for Pennsylvania to be trying to join RGGI when you have a really fragmented market and the improper signals, not only from an economic standpoint, but also an environmental standpoint, if we're just going to be shifting emissions to other parts of the grid.
Thank you.
Chairwoman Oberlander.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank all of you for your testimony. I really appreciate the data. And so frequently, as Republicans, we're said to be unemotional about things. We're about the facts. We're about the data. We're about these things. And Sean, I would love to just take you with me everywhere because you combine those two things. So I don't know how we get this message out there that these are real life people. These are real communities. These are real Little League. These are real schools. These are real banks. These are real homes. These are real brothers and sisters and family members. This is our community. And I feel what you feel. And quite frankly, it's heartbreaking to me. It makes my blood boil because your community is my community across the border with the Keystone Power Plant. It makes me want to cry when I think about where we were in the 1980s. Excuse me, with the coal industry going down and people being laid off and not being able to feed their families. That's what we're talking about, and a policy that is unnecessary, completely and totally unnecessary. Would you mind, Sean, because you did talk about the work that you've done in not just this plant but many others, of the preparation that you've done to comply with not only this particular law, but the ones before, because I know there's been a pile of cash put into that particular plant.
Well, as you know, up here at the Homer City plant, I'm going to say 7 years ago, somewhere in there, they just spent $750 million, okay, on scrubbers. They put SCRs in. Your hometown plant has done the same. So has Conemaugh. It's not like they have not stepped up to the plate on anything that needed to be done environmentally. And that's a hell of a lot of money to invest to watch it go away and not get it recouped in a 7 to 10 year span. Okay, they invested. I really believe they all want to stay open, but I understand the investment part of it. If you can't regroup your investment with the investors, you're not going to stick around. But you are right, Representative Oberlander. They have made huge investments and strides to become, better towards the environment. Can we say the same for West Virginia and Ohio on their coal plants that are remaining open, which I'm going to be honest with you, and I have no reason to lie. I sent 600 Boilermakers to Ohio and West Virginia this spring to go to work. I sent fathers and sons right here in this county to go work in Ohio, okay? And not for $16 an hour. I'm talking per diems, I'm talking hotel rooms, and they don't want them to leave, and they want. And that's the other thing we got to watch. Ohio and these other states are beginning to fleece our skilled workforce. And our skilled workforce is organized labor, especially the Boilermakers. I mean, as a Boilermaker in Pittsburgh, I have 2 counties in West Virginia and 2 Ohio. But these guys can go work anywhere they want. They're wanted. That skill is a skill. They're not spot welding fenders on tricycles at some production plant. They're skilled workers. They want them. And we want to build out new technologies right here, just like you're talking these plants have done in the past. So if we need to move forward, let's move forward with the new technologies that creates the jobs and does good by the environment, and it's a win-win for everybody. That's where I'm at, and I think we can all come to that conclusion in this room and in this state. That's where we want to go. So, you are exactly right. They have stepped up to the plate.
Thank you. I think we really need to just remind the governor of that, and we need to remind the governor of all these other things that will be lost with this policy. Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony. Thank you, Chairman.
Last week, I saw a graph of the investment that has been announced in Ohio since the previous administration announced entering into this energy tax, into RGGI. And it is dramatic. Billions of dollars have been invested in natural gas generation and other forms of generation. And there's been very little of it in Pennsylvania since then.
If I could just comment to that, Representative Kell. I mean, my environmental friends are going to tell me I'm not speaking correctly on this, but prior to RGGI being announced by Governor Wolf, Pennsylvania spent and built $14 billion worth of natural gas infrastructure. Okay, now they're going to tell, the environmental group's going to tell you in the last 4 years it was already slated in Ohio, but in the last 4 years they've built $12 billion worth of natural gas, 12 different plants in 4 years, okay? Is that just a coincidence, or is that getting ready for us to fold up as a leading exporter as electricity generation in the state of Pennsylvania? Because we are a leader. So you are correct on that.
Representative Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Steffi, you actually took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to ask about, how long is it until we start sending those workers who need those family-sustaining jobs that they can't get here anymore? How long until they start going off to other states? And you already answered that question, saying you had to send 600 of them somewhere else. I mean, it's only a matter of time before, that just becomes their new home, right? Because the opportunity is not here anymore. So my concern is that these other states, they're not just stealing our industries, they're not just stealing our energy, they're not just stealing jobs, they're stealing families, right? They're stealing brothers and fathers, sons, mothers, daughters, sisters. I've lost count of how many constituents in my area are sick of having to go to other states to visit their families. But it's because, and this is what we're seeing continue, as more and more people, just like your members, have to go somewhere else to find the opportunity that used to exist here. So you took the words right out of my mouth and already answered that question, so thank you. Mr. Crow, that the Panda Hummel plant is actually in my district, and it has been transformative for the region. You had said that if RGGI was in place, you're not sure if that plant would have existed if that retrofit would have ever happened. Can you expand on that a little?
Just getting to a financial close inside of PJM for a merchant facility, it's incredibly difficult. You have to have a completely wrapped EPC contract. You need to have financial guarantees from all counterparties to get debt financing to be able to make it justifiable. And given some of the mechanisms and probably you could argue market failures inside of PJM, the window is very tight when it does open, when generation signals are needed for invest to get a transaction done. And so as we look at the Hummel project, it was, I believe we went to financial close in 2016, and it was very close to not getting done. A 200 basis point change in interest rates almost blew up that transaction at that time. And so if you think about RGGI, every counterparty that's trying to hedge their revenue stream to get financing to build multi-billion-dollar facility, maybe to replace, say, like a Homer City, they're going to be dealing with a market that is not fully pricing in that tax, right, for your production. Whereas if they would locate that same facility, 100 miles west in Ohio, they would not have that same charge. So as we look at it, we believe that even the threat of RGGI out there has been impeding investment in the state from a generation standpoint. And as I mentioned, if you look back, I believe there was close to 9,000 megawatts of coal-fired power plants before Homer City that retired in the past decade. 12 to 13,000 megawatts of new, very efficient, very clean natural gas combined cycles got built. So there was really no decrease in economic output or electricity production in the state. If anything, there was an increase. And it benefited numerous parts of the economy because unlike, say 20, 30 years ago, because the state's such a large producer of natural gas now, that activity stayed in the state. And so our concern as we look at this market, we are heading into what we believe personally is a very severe reliability crisis if the current policies and environmental stances are being implemented. And so as we're looking at that, unfortunately, we believe the state will for the first time become a net loser in this energy revolution that's going on. And we believe that there's numerous things that the state could do or should do to enhance that. But with RGGI hanging out there, we believe it's going to stifle the vast majority of all investment in the natural gas space.
Well, thank you very much for that. I think it's important to see that true impact, right? Because I saw a study that asked people how much more they'd be willing to pay on their utility bills to help the environment, right? It was a very misleading question because the result of RGGI isn't an extra $1 or $2 on your utility bill, even though it will be way more than that. The cost of actually a power plant like the Humble Station might never exist, right? The jobs might never be there. The investment might never be there. And then that's going to have this, domino effect down the road of energy costs skyrocketing. So I just think it's important to see what these policies actually do on the local personal level, not just on your bill, and though it affects that too. And
I would say too, there's been some studies out there that have showed that the generation shifting actually might negate quite a bit of the emission reductions in the state, and that is a very real possibility in our that the future is unknown. There's a lot of different commodity markets or demand forecasts, et cetera, that are out there, but it's very easily to see a scenario where there's actually no reduction from this policy, just given the generation shifting that's going on. And I believe the only natural gas combined cycle that was merchant that got financing over the last 12 months was in Ohio. So I think it speaks volumes to this risk that's out there. And you're correct. I mentioned that we had a hearing last week up in northeastern PA, and prior to joining RGGI, our emissions rates actually declined faster than our neighbor RGGI member states, and our utility rates went down. Yeah. Whereas in our RGGI neighbor states, their emission rates went down slower, but their user rates went up. Yeah. So whether you're looking at it from the environmental perspective or the jobs perspective, or the utility cost perspective, RGGI's a loser on all three for Pennsylvania. I agree.
Yeah. One more thing, if I may, Mr. Kalemba, you were talking about like some of the numbers, the millage rates adjustments. I mean, what does that mean? Are we going to see, I think you said a 2.3 mil effect? Is that tax going to, our local school tax is going to go up that 2.3 mils this cycle?
No, next year's budget, we should not see an impact of the power plant closing. But you know, that's 100%. That 2.3 mils or the 14% increase that would be needed, you know, is based on 100% of the value. So if there's reassessments done, or as depending what happens with that property, if we're no longer getting that tax revenue, then we really only control a couple things. And one is, you know, cutting expenses, which 67, I think, % of our budget is jobs, and raising taxes. You know, the only other variable we got is state funding, you know, which we don't have any control over. So right now, short term, no. We are looking at a small tax increase potentially on next year's budget, just due to cost increases. But again, to sit there one day and think we might need a 14% increase is something we hope doesn't happen. And we certainly wouldn't want to ask taxpayers to try to, you know, fill that void. So.
And do you guys have any projections from, you know, individuals that leave the area, less demand for homes, property values end up dropping, and a reassessment happens? Do you have any projections about what that's going to end up costing farther down the road, more than just the assessment of the power plant itself?
Sure. We did, actually, it was probably a year or 2 years ago, we actually kind of looked at, you know, how many jobs the power plant had in our district. And actually what we found out, it wasn't many. I mean, it might have been 9 or 10. So a lot of the jobs individuals weren't resigning. So we didn't expect a big decrease in our earned income tax revenue. But, you know, right now, I guess, you know, the housing market's good. There isn't too many properties available, but it's hard to really project. You know, the housing market right now is kind of all over the place for a lot of reasons, but it's kind of hard to project, you know, are people moving out of the area because of the power plant or other things that are closing down, or the other jobs, you know, you mentioned, you know, the drivers, everything like that. You have to assume it have some impact. But I don't have a number on that right now, because we don't have a full kind of picture of, in our school district, how many people actually reside in it that could be affected by that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Kephart.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. You know, I want to point out that Robindale has their coal headquarters, RES, right in my district. This place on the hill, although not my district, affects my district because people in my district work at this place. You know, so I'm very fortunate that Representative Struzzi allowed me to join him in introducing the Kill Reggie bill. You know, also, you know, I've been getting on social media lately. I've been noticed some groups have been advertising about Reggie, and they're saying it's going to save you, you know, in tax money. Apparently, I don't know where. Whenever you're getting taxed $700 million, but additionally, they keep saying that it's going to clean up the air. Clean up the air. That's what we keep hearing about Reggie, right? I just want to point out that the Reggie, I pointed this out last week in our hearing in Harrisburg, does not regulate any criteria air pollutant designated by the EPA. Not sulfur dioxide, not nitrous oxide, none of that. No ozone, no air particulate matter, none of those things are regulated. This is merely carbon. And so I don't know how you can claim you're cleaning up the air with it, but it doesn't do that. It's not regulating any of those air pollutants. So, but anyhow, I also, you know, you said about the jobs, as well, about would be lost in this, and that the solar people or the green energy people, I should say, are claiming that, you know, they're creating all these jobs. Yeah, they're all government subsidized. You know, is that really creating the job when you take from others to create a new job compared to Renova? $1.2 billion. Did you say 1.2 billion? I heard about billion. That's not very far from my district. There was a private investment from a company in Virginia. Private investment. That means people took their own private capital and invested it, and that's creating all those jobs. First, green energy, we're subsidizing millions of dollars, billions of dollars, whatever the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, Jobs Reduction Act, what do you want to call it, you know, supposedly created. I just point that out. You know, I come from the coal industry, and we're talking about the economic impact of these things. Yeah, the people in my district, right where I live, in the Clearfield Center County area, ship coal to Conemaugh. So all those trucks running down there, not to mention the person I work for in the coal industry, are going to be affected whenever these plants close, because they're shipping the coal down there. The railroads, they're going to continue to ship coal. These doing overseas stuff. I guess that the climate doesn't warm if we ship it to Indonesia or Bangladesh, I suppose. I mean, it's just amazing to me. The rhetoric you hear around this, and it doesn't matter if you ask the PGM folks, the Rural Electric folks, Penelec, any of those, they all say The best stuff for them is coal, natural gas, nuclear, coal and or nuclear because it's constant and stuff. It just blows my mind, this issue. But anyhow, we're talking about all the lost revenue. It's not just going to be the Homer Center School District. But anyhow, so, I want to reach out to Mr. Crow here. Additionally, you have, the Culver Power Project right in my district, or I guess the coal yards in my district, and the power plant itself is in Representative Burns' district. But anyhow, so, going forward, I believe you have a little bit of an exemption right now on the RGGI part of that. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so going forward, though, if this would affect you and they lump you in because that's what they would potentially do, would that plant stay open?
It would be hard to say. Frankly, if the retirements that are being scheduled go into effect in 2028, and our exemption, I believe, lasts till 2031 because we burn waste coal, and waste coal, self-combust, is likely carbon neutral, if not negative to begin with, from a total full cycle generation standpoint. We might not be able. We're probably going to have to run anyway, just due to reliability issue. If it's that dire, like if we're being put in, if RGGI goes into effect and we lose our exemption post 2031, the amount of retirements that will happen in the state, it's very possible we will be mandated to run. But it would, without a mandate to run from the PUC or from PJM, we would believe, Culver in particular and Evansburg would not.
Here in Indiana that sees this happening.
Those two facilities in particular have higher heat rates, and they would not be competitive for part of the year, which makes economics of the facility very difficult to justify.
So all those people are going to lose their jobs potentially too, unless they're mandated.
It's the reliability issue. I think is incredibly serious, frankly, given what we've seen in the past couple of years.
Yeah,
but it's the economic activity would be significantly curtailed if we were not mandated to run.
Yeah. Okay. I was just, I guess we could have rolling blackouts like or brownouts, and like California does. I suppose that's an option as well. I'm sorry for my rhetoricalness there, but additionally, I just want another topic. I was sitting in an energy committee hearing just a couple of weeks ago in Harrisburg, and we had people from Philadelphia saying we should shut these places down too. And then you go home and say your conservation district, which you guys have worked with the conservation district to clean up waste coal piles in my district. Thank you. You generate electricity, but on the processes, they say, oh, let's shut those places down. It's insane. Go to the Culver Power Plant. Any of these people that suppose this, go on top of the roof and look out. You'll see new green growth where the old waste coal was. Additionally, you go to any place right along the stream, there's fish in it. Saw them myself where the old waste coal power plant or product is now cleaned up. So I just want them to know what they're actually supporting is more streams polluted and so forth. And this RGGI deal will be another disaster. But anyhow, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And you'd mentioned that we're paying more and we're subsidizing these new forms of energy coming in. What's also remarkable to me is that we're subsidizing them and getting a worse product. In every other place in the market, you pay more for something, it's because you have a better product. Here, we're paying more for something, getting less of a product that's, by the way, produced, for the most part, overseas, unlike coal, natural gas that's produced right here in Pennsylvania. It's really just a poorly thought out energy policy. Representative Armanini.
Thank you, Chairman Kale, and thank you, gentlemen, for your testimonies, as they are very true. And sitting here listening, I'm hearing, the dismantling of this area due to this facility being shut down. And again, it's coming after rural Pennsylvania, who has been the backbone of Pennsylvania for energy since the beginning. And we really need to start looking at this differently. With myself, with Representative Kephart on the Environmental Resource and Energy Committee, the chairman, Vitale, he's already going after hydrogen, which is supposed to be the new energy of the future, to block that already in Pennsylvania, saying it's bad. This type of henny penny, the sky is falling mentality is going to disrupt and ruin our Commonwealth. So we really need, and I thank you so much for your testimonies and your actions that we need to take as legislators to keep this fight going on in Harrisburg, because with the RGGI being put in place, we know that is going to devastate our state. Sean, you've already mentioned Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia. They're just chomping on the bit for this to get into place, so then they can start producing their energy, bringing it into Pennsylvania. And, you know, as we've mentioned before too, this does nothing to help the environment. And we all know that, you know, from what I've read, from not, you know, biased opinions and so forth, if Pennsylvania went 100% green and China does not do one thing, everything that we do is negated. And that's the thing that we have to start looking at, that you can't put a bubble over Pennsylvania. This RGGI, we're the only producing state of energy that is in it or will be in it, which makes no sense. You're right, there's a good reason why Virginia got out of it, because they're seeing the economic gains that they're going to be able to attain if Pennsylvania moves forward, you know, down this road. My goal is to continue to fight in Harrisburg, because I do not want Pennsylvania to become the next California, next New York type of energy state, which we all are seeing how detrimental their economies are becoming from this. So I thank you for giving us the extra quote fuel to keep fighting this fight, because we cannot lose our fossil fuels in Pennsylvania. It will be detrimental, and with the governor's plan of increasing industry in Pennsylvania, I come from the powdered metal industry, and we use natural gas significantly in the sintering process. If my cost of that would go up 30 to 40%, I'm either selling my privately owned company, or if I'm a corporation, I am moving out of Pennsylvania quicker than ever, because I'll no longer be able to be competitive. So I thank you very much for your testimony, and we're in this fight with you. Thank you.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm kind of along the same lines as Mike here. Thank all three of you for coming today and giving us information in your testimony to help us with our talking points in Harrisburg to try and combat this disastrous energy policy that we have. If we don't find a way to curb it, we are in trouble here in Pennsylvania. And we all know that. And it's a fight that we will keep at and try to find a way out of it and try to make it better for our districts here in Western Pennsylvania. One question I did, Mr. Steffi, you brought up about the amount of money that was spent on scrubbers and everything they've done to try and get ahead of these excessive emissions regulations that our state's putting out. Can either you or Mr. Crow give me an idea of things that the industry has done on its own volition to be good neighbors, be good to the communities, and show that they're here and willing to work with everybody to remain in effect and produce the energy that we need in this state?
I can tell you firsthand that I've spoken to some of the investors and owners, and they're willing to move in the future here. You know, like Keystone and Conemaugh slated to close in 2028. They would possibly like to start looking to transition into, maybe it's an SMR, maybe it's gas. They're not going to retrofit them coal plants with gas. If anything, it would be SMRs. But they are willing to move forward. And I know they're open to things like carbon capture and, you know, other things that are coming down the pike. But what we all got to realize, this is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time to get this to happen. And if I could, I would just like to comment on Representative Kephart talking about emissions. So yes, you have to agree with Reggie that, yeah, we're going to cut emissions in Pennsylvania by these closures, okay? That's a given. If it shuts down, we're not emitting no more. But if you take, just give an example, a balloon. Okay, so if you're not going to produce in Pennsylvania and it's got to get produced in Ohio and you squeeze that balloon, everything is going to Ohio and West Virginia, okay? They're still going to need the same amount of electricity generation. Now you've only displaced the emissions that this plant and Cheswick and the rest of them had closed. But if we all watch the weather, we know it's blowing back towards Pennsylvania. And if there's never nothing more that it didn't show us the Canadian wildfires, okay, did the smoke stay in Canada? No, it didn't. So we're not really cutting emissions, okay, because we still need that electricity generation, okay? It's going to happen, or we are going to have rolling blackouts and, catastrophe on no electricity. So I do think there's an appetite for these plants to step up and put on new technologies or transition into a new technology. But until you get a better climate to do it, a business climate or investment climate here in Pennsylvania, I don't foresee them stepping up. I foresee them leaving.
Thank you very much for that point. I appreciate that. Thank you again to all three of you for being here, and thank you, Chairman.
All right, any further questions? We gotta get to our next panel. Thank you very much to this panel. You guys are fantastic. Our next panel is thank you. Our next panel is a testimony on powering our future. We have Nick Cohen, President and CEO of Durrell Renewables, LLC, and David T. Stevenson, Director, Center for Energy and Environmental Policy. Gentlemen, 3 to 5 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. And we will go first to Mr. Stevenson, if we could, and we'll go online to Mr. Cohen, who is right here to our left, your right, on the screen. Mr. Stevenson, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. If would like to ask for more than 5 minutes. It's going to take a little longer than that.
That's fine.
I think you'll find it's useful. So if we put the first slide, my name is Dave Stevenson. I'm with the Caesar Rodney Institute in Delaware. I've been doing energy and environmental policy for the last 12 years, 85% of the time doing research. So I've had time to dig into things. And if you put up the first slide, the next slide. All right, this is a United Nations thing. It's called the Human Development Index, and it looks at each country and how they're doing. And they look at infant mortality, life expectancy, poverty, health, education, and they rate countries by how they stand. Well, that ordinate at the bottom is the controlling ordinate, is how much electricity per capita these countries have available. And you can see the extreme poverty when you don't have very much affordable, reliable energy. And in fact, if you look, the one on the bottom on the left-hand side is Zimbabwe, which is a horrible example. There was actually someone from the presidential administration that said last week that we should be striving to have as much electricity as Zimbabwe. So that's what we're talking about here. So we're talking about globally 1.1 billion people without electricity, 3 billion without clean cooking fuel. In the United States, we've got 10% of the population is in energy poverty. They have to decide each month if they're going to pay their utility bill or get medications or food, and 30% are struggling to pay their electric bills. We can't afford higher electric rates. I bring this up because we don't want to go backwards. 1900, we were Zimbabwe. We've gotten where we are because of affordable, reliable electricity. So there's next slide, please. So we've made great progress in this in the PJM PJM grid. If you look at it, this is the PJM system mix for carbon dioxide emissions. Go ahead and go forward. This is the chart. PJM has cut carbon emissions almost in half since 2005. And that's mainly because, I'll show you a little later, the switch to natural gas. Go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, round numbers here. Pennsylvania's $30 billion energy industry with 70,000 workers is being threatened. And I'll remind you, this is the direct impact. There's always indirect and induced impacts, which usually double this number. You're looking at potentially threatening $60 billion worth of industry and over 100,000 jobs. So the first line here, the president himself has set the goal that we're going to zero natural gas, zero coal, and when that happens, that entire industry is gone. I was involved in the EPA transition team when President Trump got elected. It got me very deep into the EPA, but it also wound up getting me into the Department of Energy, the Department of Interior. I can tell you there are thousands of life workers in these agencies that are eager to follow the president's order. President Trump had a lot of resistance in everything that was tried to get done in the transition because people want these goals. Next button, please. Neighboring states are doing the same thing. Delaware is just about to pass this week, or this next week, their 50% and 100% renewable energy goals by 2030 and 2050. Our neighboring states want to do the same thing. The president's saying, we're going to kill natural gas, we're going to kill coal. Next slide, please. Pennsylvania, as you know, is considering the carbon tax, but you're also considering renewable, more mandates for solar and wind. I'll come to that later. Next button, please. PJM risk assessment. You heard from Stephen Bennett last week. I've also gotten to talk to him in another small group. The PJM assessment shows 20%, and actually I've heard it could be as high as 25% of our 200 gigawatts of power, baseload power plants in PJM, the regional grid, are to close by 2030. That is definitely going to lead to blackouts. We're going to go from roughly 22% reserve to 3% reserve. FERC tells us we need at least 16%. We are going to have blackouts. So what's going to replace it? Next button, please. PJM experience, and this was directly from Stephen Bennett, only 5% of projects in the queue to be brought on as new power sources of wind and solar ever get built. The guys that want to build this, they wind up putting in numerous applications to PJM because they're putting them in remote spots without enough transmission. They're going to get pushback on some of these projects from the community. They don't know which ones are going to get built. So maybe they put in 10, 15 projects and only wind up building one of them. So 5% actually get built. The second problem is you need, because these are intermittent and not available, like solar only works 18% of the time, wind about 30%, you wind up with, you need 3 megawatts of wind and solar to equal 1 megawatt of closed baseload power. There's a mistake on the chart on this next line. So there's 94 gigawatts, not megawatts, in the queue at PJM of wind and solar. But if you take that and apply those things, you're actually only going to get 3 megawatts versus 40 to 50 megawatts closing. So this is a huge problem, a huge threat. Next slide, please. RGGI does not work. Now let me explain. I am the only person in the country that has done a peer-reviewed study comparing the RGGI states to states that had the same laws except for RGGI. Let me explain. That means they have deregulated so that they don't have vertical anymore like Pennsylvania did. You don't have, the power plants are not owned by the utilities. Also have a RPS requirement, and wind and solar requirement. You compare those two groups of states, which I have done and I have updated, and what you find is there is no greenhouse gas savings. We'll talk about some other problems. And Pennsylvania was one of the comparison states. Pennsylvania, between 2007 and 2019, cut emissions 40%. the 9 RGGI states that were in comparison averaged 37% when you do a few adjustments. Next button gives you what the adjustments are. The RGGI states during that time period increased electricity imports from 5% to 17%, which means that all they did was export their CO2 emissions out of state. They also shifted millions of jobs. I'm from Delaware. Let me tell you what happened in Delaware. We lost a steel plant. We lost a data center. We lost chemical plants. We lost 2 automotive assembly plants. Electric prices went up. Before all this started, Delaware's electric rate was right about at the national average. It's now at the top quartile. And that's what's going to happen here if you follow the same thing. And that means businesses leave. They don't just not come, which is bad enough. They leave. The steel mill, for example, is now in Saskatchewan, Canada. Still putting out the same amount of CO2. So when you adjust for that, that's where the 40% and the 37% comes from. So next button. The RGGI states of New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia last year imported 93 million gigawatts, that should be, of megawatt hours in 2022. And that is exactly the same amount you guys exported. So thinking about this, we'll be talking a little further down the line. Who do you think should have leverage with PJM? These guys that are importing, or you guys that are supplying it? Next button, please. So this is for you. This is Pennsylvania. I did an analysis for Pennsylvania. I testified twice in the Senate and once in the House. You could have me back again. I'll be happy to come. So total direct RGGI cost could average almost $7 billion a year. And that's from 3 things. One is lost generation. If you follow the same path, for example, in Delaware, we were generating in 2016, as recently as 78% of our electricity in state. We're now doing half that amount. So you're going to lose at least $2 billion, and that's 1,400 jobs, and that's actual counts from your data from lost generation. But then you're also going to lose coal and natural gas sales. That's going to total $1.1 billion, 3,500 jobs. And this is conservative, by the way. And then you're going to lose lost manufacturing because people will leave the state as electric rates go up. And that could be another $3.8 billion and over 17,000 jobs. This is what's going to happen if you follow RGGI. I would love, if you can arrange it, to have a sit down with the governor and explain this. There's only one other unbiased study, and that's from the U.S. Congressional Research Center that came to the exact same conclusion I did. Next slide, please. So not only does RGGI have no impact, wind and solar has not had any impact on CO2 either. After 15 years of wind and solar, only 3.4% of the PJM mix is from wind and solar. 15 years of almost every state, including Pennsylvania, having a mandate to build it. It didn't get built. For example, in Delaware, we're up to 23% mandate. We're only generating 2% in state. The rest of it, we're buying solar credits, pieces of paper from North Carolina, who didn't need them because those were built without any money from Delaware. It's just extra revenue. And then we're buying wind credits from Pennsylvania, thank you very much, that weren't needed to build your windmills. So it doesn't work. So, and I wanted to, a few of the folks gave you the numbers. I'm going to give you the exact numbers. Comparing 2010 to 2022, coal generation went from 66 million megawatts to 44 roughly. Oil went from 11 to 6, but natural gas more than replaced that. Look at the total numbers there. Total production from fossil fuels, which I don't even like the word, went up in Pennsylvania. And at the same time, you managed to cut CO2 emissions further. And just as an aside, you need to start counting all the CO2 that are captured by all the nice trees here in Pennsylvania. It's a huge number. I forget the exact number, but it's something like 100 million tons a year. So we need to count that. Next slide, please. And I watched you guys from last week. Good job. You're all a bunch of free market guys. So am I. Caesar Rodney Institute, we describe ourselves as a nonpartisan free market think tank. Before the 12 years I have spent here, I spent 23 years at the DuPont Company, created 7 businesses for DuPont. One of them made them $1 billion in profit. Left early. I've started 6 businesses on my own. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I can't stop. Please save me. I am a free market guy. The electric industry is not a free market. Get over it. We need you guys to get involved in some non-free market things to possibly to save Pennsylvania. Well, more about that later. So next button. So first of all, there's unending massive subsidies for solar, wind, batteries, and hydrogen. We're looking at the extension of the 30% investment tax credit, the production tax credit till 2032. This has been going on for, it's already been going on since the early 2000s. And supposedly solar and wind are competitive with natural gas. Why are we still giving them all these subsidies? Next one, state-based mandates and subsidies for wind and solar. So the coastal states are providing literally hundreds of billions of dollars in guaranteed premium prices for offshore wind. 4 times as expensive as natural gas, by the way, for the power. It's going to cost hundreds of billion dollars, most of it going to Europe. Texas used $7 billion of taxpayer money to create the transmission lines to bring the power from the transmission, the Texas Panhandle, to Austin, Dallas, and Houston. That's the only reason all those wind turbines were built. That was, right now, those wind turbines are providing somewhere between 20 and 25% of the power. And because they have the production tax credit, they can build in for zero, which has put coal plants and natural gas plants in Texas out of business. Several states have given, as you know, hundreds of millions of dollars to nuclear plants to keep them open. All this kind of activity is undermining the capacity market. Next slide, please. FERC. So FERC and PJM have created structural changes that you were discussing last week. This is in the offshore, the capacity market, and giving the benefit to wind and solar and penalizing baseload power. Next slide, please. This is something you might not be thinking about. I mean, no matter what we all do, 80% of all the existing power plants in the country are going to age out. It's all the nuclear plants, all the coal plants, half the natural gas plants. Wind and solar plants that were completed yesterday, they only have a 20-year life. Within 20 years, we're going to have to do something different. So next button. What we're going to do, one, is advanced nuclear. We've talked a little bit about the small modular reactors. There's takeoffs of what's in submarines and so forth. But they're demonstration projects for the most part. The first project, they have to go through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which, by the way, should be the nuclear stop sign business because they stop everything. There's one company that has now been approved to build the first small-scale reactor. It's going to go in Utah to a utility in Utah. Who knows how long it's going to take? It's going to be expensive. It's the first one. How expensive? It's going to run $4 to $5 million per megawatt, where a natural gas plant is less than $1 million. So it's like 4 or 5 times as expensive. These are going to take, there's 9 different projects already underway. These are going to take an extremely long time to get done. We shouldn't be thinking about any significant nuclear build-out before 2030. There is, however, the Senate just passed, and I'm proud to say Senator Carper, who runs the Senate Energy Committee, came up with SB 111, which is trying to get through all of this delays that are caused. It's has a whole bunch of things going on. We'd like to see your senators supporting this bill when it gets up in. It's not up for a vote yet. SB 111. It's called the Advance Act, and the advance is to advance nuclear power. Very important. I'm working on a project. There's a breakfast group down in Texas of retired nuclear engineers and Apollo program engineers who came up with a project to get rid of nuclear waste. None of these other new projects will get rid of nuclear waste. This one will. It's a high temperature reactor. There's actually General Atomics has a design for it and has been working on it. You would take the existing nuclear waste, reprocess it, put it into this reactor. There is enough nuclear waste to fuel the entire U.S. electric grid for 200 years. When you're done, the remaining waste only needs to be stored safely for 300 years. This is a major breakthrough. I'll be happy to answer more questions on it, but I don't want to take up too much time on that. The other thing I've been working on, next button please, I'm looking at this as a potential free market. This is capturing carbon dioxide from fuel stacks. And the reason I say this, go back to the 1890s. Gasoline was a waste product. It was being poured on the ground, into the rivers. Combustion engines got invented. Now it's a useful product. CO2, in my view, and I've been looking at this for 2 years, is the next example of that. The CO2 is going to be captured because it's a valuable commodity. Stanford University just came up with a new catalyst that can convert carbon dioxide to useful products 1,000 times more effective than the current catalyst. No, it hasn't been used in process yet. I happen to know personally there's 2 companies that are in the carbon capture system business, Shell Oil, Shell Chemical, and a little company called Cormatec. I'm not going to spend a lot of time unless you ask questions. These guys have workable technology. I can see that this could work. So, and there's money from the Inflation Reduction Act, federal money to subsidize it. Next one, please. This is where we get into the meat and potatoes here. Here's what I would suggest that you look at for an energy plan. First button. Number 1, preserve existing coal and natural gas extraction and existing power plants to ensure adequate baseload power. The next page I'll go into more detail. I'm telling you, if you don't take action, you're going to wind up losing all of this. Next button. Replace aging coal generation with new combustion systems. I'm suggesting even this plant, we take units 1 and 2, put new combustion in there. Think about it. You've already got $750 million in air pollution equipment. You've got 345, I think it is, kV transmission system which may be worth 5 or 10 million. You've got existing rail. There is no reason that we can't continue to burn coal. To answer a question from the last questions period, if the entire United States stopped generating carbon dioxide, it would make 4 1,000ths of a difference in global temperatures. Forget about it. We got to move on, and we got to be using coal. Why coal? Coal is a diverse fuel. You can't depend on just 1 or 2 systems. Secondly, it's on site. You've got stacks of coal on. It's the only generator that does that when everything else goes down. So we'll talk a little bit about further on that. But there's real good reason. And by the way, this is the reason I am here to keep this plant open, and ones like it. Do not shut these things. I've got some exact thoughts on the next page. Next button. You got to get involved. If you want a nuclear plant, you're going to have to get involved with the Department of Energy. I can explain a little bit more about that. It would take the rest of the day to tell you all the details, but you've got to be actively involved to get one of those plants here. Next button. Part of the vision for capturing CO2 is what do you do with it? It has value. It can be used as ethanol, methanol, any number of things, chemical derivatives. The last thing you want to do is sequester it underground. But what you need to do is you need to have a place where you can bring it together. So let's say you decide to capture the CO2 and turn it into ethanol. You need a plant to do that. But you don't need a plant next to every coal plant or next to every coal generator. So you want a hub for that. Some of this ought to go over to the Marcellus Shale for going down in the ground to enhance generation. You frack a well, you got 4 years of production, then you got to refrack it. And if you do that, and put carbon dioxide down the ground, it'll boost that production. But you got to get pipelines or trains with train cars or whatever to move it. So we need a CO2 hub. All right, final page. Sorry to take so long, but I think you needed to hear all this. So immediate actions that you need to take. First button on that, please. End RGGI. You're doing exactly the right thing. RGGI is going to destroy it. It's going to destroy anything you look at in the future. And as I said, I would be happy to sit down with the governor and try to convince him. I can do that sometimes. Next button. You need to be prepared in case federal legislation continues to eliminate carbon dioxide. So these two producers I told you have systems, they need to be proved out. The one company, they're literally just building their first prototype, and all they're going to do is suck a little bit of gas out of the fuel stack. They're not even going to put it in the fuel stack. So you got to do some prototype work, and why not here? Or, pick a plant in Pennsylvania where you try to do some of these things and find out if it works. I think it's going to work. Don't believe me? Prove it. Next button, please. All right, I'm suggesting, and this may be one of the more controversial things I say today, leverage Pennsylvania by itself, or if you can bring Ohio and West Virginia in, and position electric exporters to repair the capacity market needed to keep existing power plants open. Reopen the minimum offer price rule debate. Tell PJM, if necessary, you will leave PJM. You have that leverage. You are the ones providing all the export power. Don't think of it as, what is that going to do to us? South Carolina, Georgia, all the southern states, Tennessee, they don't belong to a regional greenhouse gas. They all cooperate, but they do it by just cooperating without a regional administrator. So don't let this be a great fear and showstopper. Use the power you have, and this is probably the biggest button. Let me put this in perspective. I did a little calculation. I think, and they'll have to correct me, but I think the Homer City plant had maybe $150 million of revenue last year. The lost capacity revenue from that change was $70 million. They would have had $220 million instead of $150, and they would probably not be closing the doors, to put this in perspective. Further perspective, if the RGGI bill went in, it would take out, it would cost this plant $45 to $50 million out of the revenue they have today. This plant would probably follow Indian River plant in Delaware and be closed. So that's the kind of numbers. I'm making an educated guess here. My first suggestion is that you talk to Mr. Wexler and ask him, what does he need to keep this plant open? That's where I would start if I lived in Pennsylvania. But I think these are things that may help. Certainly getting the capacity market fixed, where we are actually recognizing the real market value of reliable power, which we're not doing now. We're underpaying these guys to stay open. We need to fix that. That is number one priority besides staying out of RGGI. Next one would be, as I mentioned, I missed that one. You may have to supply some state funds. You talked about $7 billion out of Pennsylvania that helped these guys get the wind power built. Pennsylvania may have to come up with some cash for some of these people to stay open. And I know it busts every free market bone in my body to say it, but it may be a requirement. Next would be, as I said, partner with the Department of Energy to get your first small reactor. And one last thing, last point. There are lawsuits that are going to be done on everything the EPA has just announced that is threatening your plants. And they are all bogus lawsuits. These are the same lawsuits we fought back in 2015 and 16, the same lawsuit that wound up with West Virginia versus EPA at the Supreme Court last year. They are doing major issues without legislative support. They are demanding, as I mentioned to you, they're demanding you guys get into carbon capture. It's an unproven technology. As I have some faith in it, but it's an unproven thing. You're not allowed to do that. that the EPA has lost lawsuits before. Their plan is, we'll make the rule. By the time you can fight it in court, it'll be too late for you to do anything about it. They closed 20% of fuel plants with the mercury and air toxics rule back in 2016-17, and then it turned out to be the courts overruled it. You've got to get involved in these lawsuits. So with that, I thank you so much for your time. I thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I mean, when I heard this plant was closing, the first thing I said was, I need to be up there and talk to you folks. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, thank you, Representative Struzzi and Senator Pittman and the rest of the elected folks here for facilitating such a good conversation today. I agree with all the witnesses. They've all made really good points. And so I thought what I'd do, knowing that we're probably running out of time, I'll just introduce myself and make a couple points, and then for sure you're welcome to ask questions. I've been in this business 17 years in the development business. I'm the president and CEO of Doral Renewables, LLC. We're a Pennsylvania-based renewable energy developer with projects in 25 states, 9 electricity markets, and right now we have a $1.5 billion solar project under construction in Indiana. So we have a lot of experience in building things, and we understand how important it is in Pennsylvania for jobs and everything else. I'm not here to promote an agenda. I'm just here to speak truths. Let me just tell you my background. I'm from Pennsylvania. I owned a coal mine. I was a developer of coal power plants and then a developer of combined cycle gas power plants, and now renewables. I'm a businessman. I run a business. We have institutional investors. The reason I'm doing it is it's a good business proposition. It's revitalizing rural areas of Pennsylvania, and it's just good business. It makes sense. Renewables are not a threat to anybody else, especially in Pennsylvania where there's practically no renewables, and it's not necessarily a great place to do that. I believe Pennsylvania's competitive advantage is in its energy diversity. A question that many people posed was, how do we keep the rates low for ratepayers? Well, gas sets the price for power in the market, and so we should be doing all the things that we can to keep the prices low. RGGI is a really bad idea for a lot of reasons that were stated today. For sure, it will increase rates for the ratepayers, and nobody wants to see that. It'll make Pennsylvania less competitive because we do have our competitive advantage is the energy diversity that we have: coal, gas, sun, wind, everything. And so it's easy if you're a state that doesn't have this to sign on to RGGI. That's an easy thing to do. But here we have those competitive advantages, and we don't want to give them away by signing on to RGGI. I don't really see it happening because I don't think it makes a lot of sense. The stick is not the way to solve the problems. Emissions are already naturally coming down, as one of your former guests pointed out. Actually, Mr. Clemson, I think, had a graph showing how natural gas has contributed to much lower emissions over the past decade. So, our air is getting better, and the market is working towards solutions that are attractive to investors and are creating jobs and economic revitalization. So I'm just saying that I'm really not for RGGI, and I do think that every energy source should be allowed to compete in the market. And the best thing probably that a state can do is just stay out of everybody's business and let us run our companies and let the free market determine the best solutions, since they are working. With that said, I will turn it back over to the representative, and I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Mr. Stevenson, you had mentioned something in your presentation I'd like to drill into a little bit deeper. I think there is a profound misunderstanding generally of what PJM is and what they do. Even amongst us representatives, I know I can speak for myself. I don't quite understand the operations and how it goes. We're learning, but you'd mentioned getting out of PJM.
Yes.
My understanding is PJM is a private organization with membership of generators and distributors. How would you go about doing something like that?
Each state has to decide that they want it to be part of PJM. It's not just the generators. If the state, for example, if you remember when the minimum offer price rule came out, it wasn't the generators that opposed it. It was the state governments of New Jersey, Virginia, Maryland, and Illinois. They threatened to pull out, and that got PJM so backwards that they went ahead and did what those states were asking for. And what was going to happen with the minimum offer price rule was there would be, if you got a state grant or mandate which gave you an advantage, so example, a utility solar field, when you bid in for the capacity market, you would start off with a very high price. Where a coal plant or natural gas plant that didn't get any subsidies would be a true market. You could bid zero or you could bid any number. So what it did, it basically said that solar and wind were probably not going to ever win capacity market. And one of the things that these states wanted, not Illinois, but the coastal states, wanted to make sure offshore wind would be able to bid into the capacity market to try and reduce the cost to ratepayers in their states, because they would collect money from everybody throughout the PJM grid. So it is. Each state can make a decision to pull out, or as they did, you threaten to pull out, and you get a reaction from PJM. Are you going to do what we want to do, which is to go back to the 2019 version of the minimum offer price rule, which was actually fair and didn't put people like Homer City 70 million short on revenue, and could help keep this plan open.
I met yesterday with members from the Ohio Assembly and Senate, and we were talking about PJM and the problems and how other states, New Jersey, Delaware in particular, have been beating their chest, for lack of a better word. And I think you're right. I think it's about time that we started exploring that, because we're the ones that are suffering the consequences of these bad policies, and we're just taking it without any real response. So I appreciate you saying that.
Going to be real blunt. Without that threat, you're taking a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Cohen, something that has been very front of the mind in Western Pennsylvania, in particular in my area, where Shell has built a $10 billion petrochemical facility, and others are still manufacturing, is a discussion on hydrogen. Hydrogen is a new talking point. It's a conversation. I know there's different forms of it: blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, pink hydrogen, gray hydrogen. Tell me the reality of hydrogen. Is this something that eventually can get off of the subsidy track, or is this more of just a experiment now? Or is this something that we could do going into the future?
Yeah, excuse me. There are a lot of colors when you describe hydrogen, and at the end of the day, it all concludes with one, product, which is a hydrogen molecule. So the colors just describe how you manufacture it. Right now, most hydrogen is created through what you mentioned, gray hydrogen, which is just using methane and reforming it to get the hydrogen out, basically mixing it with steam and high heat. And it's the lowest cost for hydrogen. It's such a low cost that it's going to be the leading source of hydrogen for a long time. There are new technologies coming along, including, like Mr. Clemson mentioned, carbon sequestration. When you create the hydrogen, if you can capture from natural gas, which is one of Pennsylvania's competitive advantages, abundant, cheap natural gas, if you can capture the carbon dioxide, which is one of the byproducts of the process, you can lower the carbon intensity. And, it is very plausible that over the next 5 or 10 years, it will become a competitive form of hydrogen. It's definitely an opportunity for businesses to invest and maybe repurpose some of the byproducts like CO2 into other valuable product chains. So, I think the subsidy for hydrogen, which is a carbon intensity subsidy, it applies to natural gas, it applies to what they call green hydrogen, pink hydrogen. Everybody is getting something to try to get to cost parity against gray hydrogen. And so I see it as being beneficial for anybody, any community that gets a project and gets this investment. It's not really going to take away from any sort of hydrogen business that's already out there. A lot of the hydrogen producers are already in this business and trying to take advantage of the advancements. So the answer is eventually whatever subsidy is being provided for alternative forms of carbon intensity hydrogen will go away. But it's definitely needed in order to make it cost effective at this point.
Representative Struzzi.
Thank you, Chairman Kale. I appreciate you both being here today. Mr. Cohen, wish you could have been here in person. I know you had some travel issues. Clearly we want to do everything we can, if possible, to keep the existing plant open. And I appreciate what you laid out here, Mr. Stevenson. I think these are some really, really good thoughts and ideas that my colleagues and I will continue to process and see what we can do. But you had mentioned combustion as a possible option for the Homer City plant. Can you talk a little bit more about that, what it would take to convert that and the possible cost related to that?
No.
Okay.
Not in detail. But that's, you can get that number. The first thing you have to do is have a discussion with the plant, if they are even interested in doing it. But the potential is, you've got this entire infrastructure around the plant, and the combustion box and system is just one piece of that. So if all you were going to do is replace that, one of the advantages is the new combustion units can be designed to be load following, which means they can ramp up and down rapidly. One of the problems with the boilers they have now is that they can't. It was designed to run all the time. At one point they had 90% operation. And when you stop doing that, it becomes very inefficient. I didn't look at this plant in particular, but I looked at 5 other coal-powered power plants. When you are doing that inefficient running of the plant, it requires using more coal, which means more CO2. It literally got done. I was looking at the Indian River Power Plant in Delaware. It's the only coal-fired plant left in Delaware, in my county. Its efficiency doubled. If you got down to a low enough number, say 10% capacity factor, it actually doubled the amount of coal they needed to use for the same megawatt. So, and that's another cost factor, obviously. So if you're going to put a new boiler in, you would put one that's designed for ramping up and down. Secondly, you wouldn't necessarily have to be as big as the current units. I mean, they're pretty, at 600 and some megawatts apiece. You could do something smaller. You've got to be looking at several $100 million. I don't know the exact number. And then you got to decide, all right, while we're doing that, what other piping, whatever needs to be done. But you're most likely going to be able to use the air pollution equipment again. And certainly the transmission lines and everything else you're doing, the rail lines and how you're physically handling the coal, all of that infrastructure is already there. So it's not like building a plant from scratch. Okay. Now, I was not unaware of the natural gas line that's nearby. It might make more sense to do natural gas. But from a long-term prospect, I think we need to stay in coal. We need that fuel diversity and would rather see them stay in coal. You could do one plant, you could do just unit 1, just unit 2, you could do spread them out, do one or two. One other option PJM has, beyond getting out of the market and changing the capacity market, they can do things with individual power plants. So I mentioned the Indian River Power Plant in Delaware. It was going to close last June. And PJM said, no, you can't close because it's the most southern plant on the entire Delmarva Peninsula, and we won't be able to control the voltage regulation. The voltage will vary too much, so we're going to keep that plant open just to do voltage regulation. Well, that plant was probably doing $50 million a year in sales between capacity and selling product. They gave them $67 million a year for 5 years to stay open, producing nothing other than when they're needed for voltage control. Now, you don't have that situation here, but PJM could develop a reliability rule where they would give extra capacity dollars to a plant they really wanted to keep open, like this one. And it may be just enough money to keep the plant open. Okay. If you stay away from Reggie as well.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm sure that we will have some conversations related to PJM here in the near future. Just a real quick question for Mr. Cohen. Talking about the hydrogen, the process, what kind of infrastructure, size, facility would be utilized to do the hydrogen process?
So if you're talking about new facilities, you're looking at sizable investments, hundreds of millions of dollars. They're big projects coming to to local areas. So it's a great opportunity to build things. And the footprint may not be that big. If it's a green project, it may need a solar field or something like that. And you're talking about a couple thousand acres. If it's just natural gas based and they're doing the carbon capture, it can be done on a small footprint, a very small footprint. One question, it's always better to do it near the user source. So if you do it near like a manufacturing base or in an industry cluster, it makes a lot of sense. You don't have to pipe it as far. I see hydrogen projects in Pennsylvania peppering across the state in areas that are industrial.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Chairwoman Oberlander.
Thank you. Thank you both for your testimony. Question really regarding the price of the power. And your first slide, Mr. Stevenson, talks about the cost and then how that's related to our human development. And you said 10% of Americans are having trouble making the decision whether to pay for medicine or their power, and then 30%. So it seems pretty likely that with this increase in cost, those percentages are going to go up. And then I flipped to your slide of the higher electric rates. And as the manufacturing caucus chairman, I can tell you that I've been in and out of manufacturing facilities over the past 4 years while we've been battling this. And when I ask the question, what happens to your power when RGGI goes into effect, they don't know.
No, they don't.
Our ratepayers at the personal level don't know. How do we harness the outrage that would be created when they have to start paying that now so that we can build that coalition? As you know, we've been battling this. The Boilermakers have been battling this. The other trade unions have been battling this. But how do we harness that population and those manufacturers who are going to leave because they're not going to be able to pay these prices? Can you help us? And I'm certainly open to Mr. Cohen sharing his thoughts on that too.
A good place to look is Virginia. It's very hard to track RGGI prices and how it's affecting consumer prices in a deregulated state because the utility doesn't buy it. But Virginia is still vertically integrated. So we have an exact number. They were paying, I think the last number was something like $6.50 a megawatt hour, which is 1 megawatt hour is typically what a residential person will use in a month. So you're looking at maybe $80 a year. But now you start looking at the largest energy users who might be using 1 million megawatts a year, and now you're talking $6 million added to the bill. So it depends on the size of the volume. But a good place to start is at the current rate. But that's only the current rate. Right now, RGGI auctions are going for about $13 a ton. But what RGGI has done over the years is they've created a minimum price and a maximum price, which increases every year. So it's not an auction. They call it an auction, but literally they've got it so narrow that they know it's going to be $13 a ton, because if not, we're going to put more allowances in, and if it gets too high, we'll take them out. So it's a controlled market, and the forecast is it's going to $24 a ton by 2032. And it will happen. So you're going to see almost a doubling of the current price. So that $650 goes to 13, that $1 million goes to, or $6 million goes to 12 million. And remember, the intent of RGGI is to stop production of natural gas and coal, and they're not going to stop. It doesn't right now. The current agreements end at 2032, but it's not to end there. They'll go to whatever price they have to, in the end, to stop the use of coal and natural gas. It's simple as that. That's the intent.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I would agree with Mr. Clemson. I don't have anything to add to that.
Thank you. I guess I just want to emphasize that point one more time. In addition to out of control inflation and people not being able to pay for their energy or their food or the gas for their car, we've got this to look forward to.
Yes.
It's time for RGGI to end. Yes. Thank you. Thank you,
yes.
Chairman.
And just one comment real quickly. On the Philadelphia is looking at a hydrogen hub. They're applying, the region is looking for $900 million in federal grants, which I think is only 50% of the cost. So you're looking at almost $2 billion. Just that, my wife is a journalist, and she did an article last week.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you both for being here and giving us your testimony today. One of the things in Harrisburg that on the policy side that bothers me is when we pick and choose tax credits for certain groups. I'd rather see it be done across the board for all our constituents across the state rather than different specific things. So to me, it appears if some generators are able to use state subsidies to outcompete other energy providers, can you answer the question is, do you feel that this subsidized price for these generators has accelerated the closure for our baseload generators?
Absolutely. More so because you haven't built as much wind as some other states. But what you're seeing, and the reason that some states are giving nuclear plants all that money, $300 million in, I think it was Illinois, is because they can't compete. So what wind projects get what is called a production tax credit, and it has varied over the years. But let's say it's running around $20 a megawatt hour. So say in PJM we're doing a typical wholesale bid might be $35, and at night it might only be $25. So a base load is going to run all night. So they would be offering a $25, and that would be enough money they can stay open. But now here comes the wind project. They only get the production credit when they're producing power and sending it to the grid. So if they have to, they'll go a lower price because they're getting $20 from the federal government, whether they do anything else, get any other revenue. So you wind up with sometimes negative prices, which is really what hurt the nuclear plants. you'll get -$5. We'll give our power away, and that does, it causes plants to close. It has caused, that's what happened in Texas. It's causing natural gas and coal plants in Texas to close because they're up to like 25% wind and solar. So it very much does that.
But respectfully, I would just like to say in Pennsylvania, I don't see that as being a risk. Firstly, the penetration of renewables is incredibly low. And even if all the renewables that are being talked about in Pennsylvania that are in the PJM get realized, it'll be a very long time from now. And it still won't be impactful. The tax credit is exactly that. We already all pay too much in taxes. Corporations are being burdened everywhere, and so are individuals. And so the tax credits are an incentive for investors to put their investments in these projects, and the investors get the tax credit. It's not really a subsidy. As much as it's an incentive that creates more liquidity for the financing of projects. So I would just like to put that out there. I just don't see the renewables being impactful on the situation. Also, as far as the negative pricing goes, which has not really happened in Pennsylvania, but it's important to understand that the low pricing that a renewable energy project has, number one, theoretically could be good for consumers. But number two, the way that power is dispatched and the pricing works in the market is that, you can, let me just give one example. If the grid says we need 1,000 megawatts, the first people to bid in will be the ones with the lowest costs. And that could be like a wind farm for like $1. And that's not because they think that they're selling their power for $1. They don't. It costs more than that to operate a wind farm, even though the fuel is free. So then say all the renewables come in this 1,000 megawatt scenario, and they add up to 100 megawatts. So 900 megawatts are still needed. So the next guy who comes in might be a combined cycle, like a new combined cycle natural gas power plant. And they might say, okay, well, we're $40. So now they just set a price of 40, and then all those guys come in, and the next thing you know, we're still 300 megawatts short. And then they say, okay, well, who's next in line? And then maybe you start to see some coal plants come online, and maybe their cost is $50. I'm just making up numbers here. And now that's the price of the market. And then finally, when the last guy gets there, whatever his cost is the price of the power. And so everybody before them really was not that impactful. It's the last one in to meet the demand. So I just wanted to impart how the pricing works in the market. So a $1 or a negative wind farm in Pennsylvania won't make a difference. Maybe in Texas it does, because Texas has 40% penetration of renewables, and that is significant. But Pennsylvania is a very, very, very long way off from achieving anything like that.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen, for your point, and thank you for your answer. I just think that as far as for Pennsylvania and its energy policy going forward, we need to be very careful, because we do not want to hurt our baseload suppliers and end up with the blackouts like we have seen in other places. Thank you very much.
I do agree it's not an immediate threat in Pennsylvania because it is so low, but that could change.
Representative Armanini.
Thank you again, Chairman, and thank you both for your excellent testimonies and information. Mr. Cohen, my question just pertains to you. Looking over, you have several solar facilities throughout the country. You're probably, if not the largest, one of the largest producers of solar in the United States. With the units that, of course, you are putting up, where are they manufactured?
Firstly, as you can imagine, there's thousands of parts that come from all over the world, everything from the steel and the nuts and bolts to the panels. Probably within your question, you're thinking about the panels. Our
Correct.
Panels come from Southeast Asia. There are 4 countries in Southeast Asia that have plants that have been cleared by the Department of Commerce in an audit process to assure that none of the parts inside or the materials are coming from forced labor areas in China. In our case, most of the materials are coming from outside of China. Some of the key ingredients come from Germany. We also have a substantial number of panels that come from India. We would like panels to come from the United States. They're just not available at a utility scale. They're sold out. And hopefully we'll see more manufacturing in America, because the notion that we have to like ship these panels all over the world and we've seen the vulnerability with supply chains. They've really messed up everybody's business, not just renewable energy, but other businesses too. And so we need to do more manufacturing in America. And by the way, Pennsylvania is one of the best places if you're going to build solar panels. Or organize a solar industry cluster with all the steel and everything else. Pennsylvania is absolutely competitively advantaged to do that. Unfortunately, it takes time, and it's not going to help me build all the projects that we're building. We're infusing tens of millions of dollars into rural communities across America. And, like, for example, in Indiana, I have a project with 85 farm families in it, and 2 municipalities, and each one is getting $40 million, which, they're coming from an annual budget of 3 million or 4 million, and they're getting 40 million. So it's very, very impactful to these communities. And hopefully we'll have more manufacturing in the U.S. in the future, and the future of building things, whether it's hydrogen or renewable energy or anything. There'll be more attention given to the benefits of having manufacturing here in the U.S.
Thank you. And one other question. With your involvement in the growth of your company, if the federal government was not involved as much with renewables, would you still see your company investing and pushing as hard as you are without government assistance?
The investment tax credit has created a market for large investors, U.S.-based investors like the large banks, to invest in companies like ours. Those investments flow into rural communities, and without the investment tax credit, the liquidity wouldn't be there as much. That they would probably be investing in other things, or saving and not investing, or going to foreign countries. Who knows what they'd be doing? Mm-hmm. So these incentives, cause these corporations, not us, but the investor corporations, to pay less taxes on their revenues. As I said, I think we all can agree they're overtaxed as it is, and so if they can pay lower taxes because they invested in us, that's not a bad deal, and I don't even necessarily call that a subsidy.
I can understand that, but again, if we could also do this for our other industries that are producing energy, I think that it would benefit too. Because right now, anything with fossil, they're basically saying, get out, it's not part of the future, to whereas it will definitely be part of the future. I find it ironic, everything that we are surrounded by today either has natural gas or an oil that was used to produce it. I'm just recalling a committee meeting one time when one of the members said she will not eat M&Ms anymore because they have paraffin wax on them. Now, that is the type of mentality and thinking we do not need in Pennsylvania, which is just going to bury us. But, I thank you for your answers, for that. And it's definitely driven, I believe, by our federal government and states trying to push so much of this energy, to whereas it's being manufactured in countries which have no restrictions on emissions. And, it's a whole different world over there. So how much energy are we actually using and emitting more to produce what we think is cleaner energy for here? It would be interesting, the feedback of India's input in manufacturing panels. But I thank you both again.
Yeah, I would just like to say that it's we should be doing everything we can to promote all of the energy sources that we have in Pennsylvania. It's really important. We can't rely on one, and the fact is that renewables are they are a big win for rural communities, but it's still it's still small potatoes, right? Because the penetration is so low in Pennsylvania that at this point it hasn't been that impactful, and at the rate that PJM is moving and taking into consideration the terrain and everything else, it's going to be a very, very long time before it's anything other than a win for local communities here and there. It's just not at prime time yet where it's a serious contender as an energy source. It maybe in the future it will be, but for now, we need our existing power plants. And I think even in PJM's own publications, they've noted that the number of retirements of legacy power plants is way outstripping the number of new power plants coming online. And what does that mean? Maybe it means grid instability. I don't know. I can see those arguments, but more so, it means that capacity prices are going to be very, very high in the future. And it's not just my opinion; it's the opinion of market agencies and other experts and investors, and that means higher rates for ratepayers, and that's not what anybody wants.
All right. You touched upon something there, Representative Armanini, that is, I think, bears repeating, and it's something that Chairwoman Oberlander touched on as well. We are manufacturing the renewables, much of them from Southeast Asia, and one of the things that's preventing us from doing it here are policies like RGGI, like this energy tax, because the number two expense in manufacturing, sometimes number one expense, is energy costs. And energy costs are going to go up, which means we're creating more demand for manufacturing overseas, which means there's going to be more pollution. And I think that's a point that we really need to be driving home as well. One last question I have before we close this out, and I think this is something you mentioned, Mr. Stevenson, in your testimony, and I really want to drill down on this. You had mentioned that a PGM decision from 2019, I believe you stated, cost this Homer City plant $70 million of revenue this past year. Is that correct?
Again, it's an educated guess. But what we were looking at, we had capacity prices up over $100, typically $140, $150 for capacity prices. Those capacity prices right now are running at around 30. And so that $100 difference times 3.5 or 3.3 million megawatt hours works out to that kind of number.
And this energy tax that the last administration got us started on with RGGI, and the current administration is, it's hard to say where they're at on it, quite frankly. But looks like they are going forward with at least putting in the budget the revenue from the energy tax. That is a $40 million hit. Is that what you said?
I think it would be, yes. If you're at $13 a ton, I think there's 3.3 million megawatt hours last year from this plant, and it's basically a ton per megawatt hour. So, yeah, you're looking at, it works out to about 45 million. One correction on the capacity, it's megawatt days is how you do it. So you've got 1,888 megawatts times 365 days times the $30 instead of 140 or 130.
It just seems like
But
with this.
it's big numbers, and they add up very quickly. I will tell you, Delaware has been in since 2009 in RGGI, gotten something like $228 million in revenue, small state. Sitting unspent is about 170 million of that. Good intentions. We're going to spend it on energy efficiency. We're going to spend it on solar or whatever. The government is crappy at doing that. So literally, we're sitting on 11, 12 years worth of RGGI revenue. 70% of every dollar we ever got is still sitting in government coffers.
I just find it.
Governments don't know how to spend this money, right?
I find it remarkable that it was just stated that, no, I agree with you, that PJM is complaining about plant closures, and then you hear about a policy that costs a plant that's going to close $70 million a year. It's like the arsonist complaining about the fire. It's like, what are we doing with this situation with our energy policy here?
And my sense, listening to Mr. Bennett, is I think he realizes it, but it's political. I mean, PJM's position is we always say yes to the state, whatever the state policy is.
Yeah, we certainly need to get more involved.
We will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Representative Struzzi, if you'd like to give some closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all the testifiers today. Thanks for all of you for attending. This has been a very eye-opening hearing on energy policy. Clearly, I will say when I got the news that the Homer City plant was going to be shutting down back in March, it was like a gut punch. I mean, I felt floored because it makes no sense. We did this to ourselves. Bad policy over the years, everything that we've discussed today, and looking at what we have here in Pennsylvania, and we're not using it. It makes zero sense to me when, we could be lowering property taxes. We could be giving money back to families across this Commonwealth who desperately need it right now. And instead, we're talking about new taxes and things that hurt working people, working families. So it makes zero sense to me. But I think, we outlined some really good thoughts here today that will help us in Harrisburg to hopefully craft policy that not only works with the environment, but also capitalizes on our vast, abundant natural resources here in Pennsylvania. So I thank you all for being here. Thanks to my colleagues who traveled here today. And hopefully we can do some good for the people of Pennsylvania in the future related to energy. So thank you all.
Thank you, Representative Struzzi. Thank you for your leadership again on this issue. You and Senator Pittman have been absolutely out front on this, and we wouldn't be where we are as far as the fight goes without you all. So it's very much appreciated, the work that you've put into this. I just want to close on this. Governor Shapiro in April of 2022, when he was on the campaign trail, said this: "Let me be very clear. Energy policy for me must pass the test of protecting jobs, lowering consumer prices, and addressing climate change. It is not clear to me that RGGI meets that test." I would submit that after hearing today's testimony, he would probably add grid stability to that, and after hearing what I've heard the last couple of days. But also, after hearing today's testimony, there is absolutely zero way that this meets the test, that RGGI, going into RGGI, meets that test, that going into this energy tax meets that test. Unfortunately, he has not exited this energy tax, and he has the ability to do so. He could do it tomorrow. Instead, it's been put into his budget. It's about $700 million appropriated from revenue for going into this energy tax. If he's serious about his campaign promise, we need to see progress in exiting this disastrous energy policy. There's still time to do it, and I hope he does, and I hope he hears testimony like this so that we can go forward in Pennsylvania with sound energy policy. But the Republican caucus desires to bring this hope and opportunity to all Pennsylvanians. To do so, we need to ensure access to reliable and inexpensive energy. Pennsylvania generates energy using the most advanced methods and adhering to stringent regulations, and there is nothing wrong with our coal or gas-fired electric generators. Pennsylvania powers America using American fuels and American standards. When it comes to providing energy, Pennsylvania does it the best, and this is why we must encourage growth in our energy sector, and this is why we'll continue to fight in the House Republican caucus. Thank you all again for testifying. Thank you, Representative Struzzi. This meeting is adjourned.